Page 38. Pure, White and Deadly, by John Yudkin, 1972. Chapter 7. Not only sugar is sweet. The most obvious property of sugar is its sweetness, but it has several others. It aids preservation, provides bulk in confectionery, enhances flavor and appearance by caramelizing with heat, gives a mouthfeel to soft drinks, promotes the gelling of jam and marmalade and provides calories. Alternative sweeteners fall into two groups. One provides sweetness, but virtually none of the other features I have mentioned. The other provides sweetness together with calories and several, if not all, of the other functions of sugar. Some properties of sugar with examples of use. 1. Sweetness, beverages. 2. Flavor enhancer, canned vegetables. 3. Mouthfeel or a body, soft drinks. 4. Preservation, candied fruits, jam. 5. Promotes gelling of pectin, jam. 6. Produces range of textures, confectionery. 7. Depresses freezing point, ice cream. 8. Caramelizes, confectionery, crust on bread. 9. Decoration, icing. 10. Fermentable, wine. The caloric sweeteners are either sugars or they are chemically related to one or other of the sugars. Glucose and fructose are the two sugars most commonly used. Glucose, sometimes called dextrose, is made very easily from starch, which, as we saw, is a large molecule made up of glucose units joined together. When starch is treated with acid or alkali, or with appropriate enzymes, it splits into its component glucose units. Much of the glucose in confectionery is used in the form of a syrup, for example corn syrup made from maize starch. It is less sweet than ordinary sugar. Sucrose, you will recall, consists of a combination of glucose with an equal amount of fructose. Fructose seems to be the part of the sucrose that produces most of the ill effects of sucrose. It is nevertheless often used instead of sucrose for diabetics, because it does not create an immediate need for insulin, as glucose does. One other possible advantage of fructose is that it is nearly twice as sweet as sucrose, so that less, with fewer calories, is needed to produce the same degree of sweetness. During the past 20 years or so, it has become increasingly practical to produce a mixture of glucose and fructose from starch, which previously could only be made to yield glucose. The process, developed in Japan, depends on the use of an enzyme called glucose isomerase, which converts the glucose into fructose. By manipulation of the conditions, the proportion of glucose converted to fructose can be varied, producing a mixture with about equal proportions of glucose and fructose, as in invert sugar, or with up to 90% fructose. The final product is usually not crystallized from the solution in which it is produced, being transported and used as a high fructose syrup, HFS. This is now used on quite a large scale, especially in the USA and Japan, as an alternative to ordinary sugar. Manufacturers can switch from sucrose to HFS and back according to the fluctuations in sugar and starch prices. Because of this, the farmers in Europe who produce sugar beet have persuaded the EEC authorities to put a levy on HFS production and a quota on its import. The non-sugar caloric sweeteners are made from sugars, and are what chemists call polyols. By the process of chemical reduction adding hydrogen atoms, for example to fructose, so that one more alcohol group is formed and added to the 5 already present S-orbital is produced. Other polyols that can be used include maltitol and xylitol. They all provide, in a given quantity, about the same number of calories as ordinary sugar, sucrose. However, as they are not as sweet, you would tend to use more, and so take in more calories. These caloric sweeteners are therefore of no help in a slimming diet, but sorbitol is sometimes recommended as an alternative to ordinary sugar for diabetics, and xylitol has been used in candy and chewing gum because it does not harm the teeth. A major disadvantage in these polyols is that, unless taken in fairly small quantities, they tend to cause diarrhea. The non-caloric sweeteners have no chemical relationship to the sugars and are very much sweeter, so that only tiny quantities are used. For this reason they are sometimes called intense sweeteners. They have mostly been discovered accidentally in research laboratories where chemists were synthesizing new chemical substances for quite other purposes. They can be used to assist weight loss through reduced calorie intake, to help sufferers from diseases such as diabetes which affect sugar metabolism, to substitute for sugar in times of shortage, for example during war, or, increasingly, I am glad to say, to help to prevent the sugar-promoted diseases described in this book. The best-known non-caloric sweetener is saccharin, which was discovered in 1879. Its use increased considerably during the sugar shortage of the First World War. Another widely used non-caloric sweetener is cyclamate, discovered in 1937. It is, however, at present not used in the USA or the UK. A new, increasingly popular sweetener is aspartame. Because the non-caloric sweeteners do not have the properties of sucrose in providing bulk, preservative power and so on, they are used almost exclusively as so-called tabletop sweeteners, to be added to tea or coffee, or else in the manufacture of low-calorie cold drinks. To a small extent they may also be used in home cooking, in the preparation of some items such as fruit salad. Their lack of bulk, however, rules them out as sugar substitutes in most desserts, confectionery and ice cream. From time to time suspicions arise that the alternative sweeteners could be harmful. This happens most often in relation to the non-caloric sweeteners, presumably on the grounds that most have a chemical composition quite different from that of any of the natural sugars, or, indeed, of any naturally occurring substance. The suspicions usually arise from some superficial or incomplete research that does no more than hint at some possible harmful effect detected in, for instance, laboratory rats which have been fed the sweetener. The result is usually great contention and the setting up of a much more extensive investigation. In these circumstances, tests are often carried out with phenomenally large doses of the sweetener. A recent test with saccharin used quantities that in a human being would require the daily consumption of, for instance, several hundred cans of soft drinks sweetened solely with saccharin. This much saccharin would have the sweetening power of some 5 kilograms of sugar a day. It is worth spending a moment here on the question of the toxicity of substances that accidentally or intentionally may find their way into our food. The most important fact to remember is that there is really no such thing as something being poisonous, or something not being poisonous, just like that. What matters is not only the nature of the substance, but also its quantity. No substance is intrinsically harmless. You can make yourself dangerously ill by taking large quantities of water. No substance is intrinsically harmful. It was fashionable in the early part of this century to give medicines containing arsenic as a tonic, although of course the quantities were very small indeed. Similarly, if it turns out that cyclamate, or saccharin, or anything else, causes some undesirable effect in daily amounts that are 50 or 100 times as much as anyone could possibly take, and even then only when taken over a period of 10 years or more, it would not be sensible to ban it automatically. In the USA the situation was complicated by what is known as the Delaney Clause, agreed by the U.S. Senate in 1958, which says that an additive shall be deemed safe if it is found to induce cancer when ingested by man or animal. This has been interpreted as forbidding the use as a food additive of any substance that, in any quantity, and over however long a period, produces cancer in any species of animal. It was this provision that led to the banning of cyclamate in the USA in 1970. This decision was based on the result of one experiment in which a small proportion of rats fed for a long time with very large doses of a mixture of cyclamate and saccharin developed cancer of the bladder. Within a week or two of the American decision, the UK followed its example, so that cyclamate is not used by the food industry in either country, although the position is under review. However, 16 out of the 17 countries of Western Europe do permit the use of cyclamate. Those people who are still concerned about the possible hazards of taking artificial sweeteners could reduce or abolish their cause for worry by using mixed sweeteners. This should reduce the possibility of being harmed by any one of them, since each would be present in a lower concentration than if it were the sole sweetening agent. Relative sweetness of sweetening agents. Threshold sweetness of sucrose equals 1 amyl.0, caloric sweeteners glucose 0.5, sorbitol 0.5, mannitol 0.7, litol 1.0, fructose 1.7. Non-caloric sweeteners. Cyclamate 30, asulfame K 150, aspartame 200, saccharin 300, thaumatin 3000. At present, the better-known non-caloric sweeteners permitted in one or more of the countries that control food additives are saccharin, cyclamate, aspartame, asulfame K and thaumatin, talin. Their relative sweetness compared with sugar is given in the table. For a variety of reasons, however, these figures are only approximate. First, people's subjective assessment of sweetness varies. Second, the intensity of some sweeteners increases or decreases with the acidity of the food or drink to which they are added. Third, sometimes their relative sweetness changes with the degree of their dilution and the temperature of the food or drink. The non-caloric sweeteners are not entirely interchangeable. For example, saccharin and, to a lesser extent, aspartame are not stable to heat, so they are not used in the preparation of dishes that require prolonged cooking. In addition, aspartame, being a compound of two amino acids, aspartic acid and phenylalanine, may cause upset in children born with the condition of phenylketonuria, PKU. Such children are unable to deal with more than a small quantity at a time of phenylalanine, one of the amino acids found in most proteins. If more than this limited amount is taken regularly, a substance is produced that can cause mental impairment. Children usually grow out of PKU by the age of 10 years or so. Meanwhile, the condition is controlled by giving the sufferer a carefully constructed diet containing sorts and quantities of protein that enable the phenylalanine intake to be limited. In addition, a child with PKU should be made aware of which soft drinks are sweetened with aspartame, and be taught to avoid these. Page 46.